Honorable judges and fellows, my name is Jabiz and I'm going to talk about depression in this project today. The purpose of this project is to provide a new aspect to examine depression. Often in our society, there's a stigma against mental illness and depression. People think that having such issues as mental illness or depression is a sign of having a weak personality, but it's simply not true. Through the method of affective science, I believe we could learn the nature of depression in a more unbiased and neutral way. The second purpose of this project is to acknowledge features of human depression. Since we're the most complicated creatures on this planet, our depression is different from other animal species' depression, and I would like to provide several examples. As I previously mentioned, I believe we have to learn about depression in a more unbiased way. Third, I would like to introduce the method called affective science here. What is affective science? Put it simply, affective science is a scientific approach to study one's emotion. To better elaborate this point, I would like to draw an analogy here, and that is the analogy of goat. When a goat is eating carrot, its brain correspondingly generates a feeling of satisfaction or happiness. Thus, the goat may be feeling happy. Interestingly, the goat does not feel happy randomly. The goats feel happy is because it's doing something beneficial for its survival. So the sense of happiness is a reward given by its brain. Since most of the emotions have reasons, those sometimes considered negative emotions have reasons too. For example, when a goat is encountering a storm, its emotional system or its brain makes it anxious, panic, or sometimes neurotic. It is also a result generated by its emotional system because at this time, emotional system wants the goat to focus on that one thing that is threatening its life. So in this way, the chances of goat survival is increased because the goat would try its best to exclude that factors that may cause its demise. Through affective science and the analogy of goat, we could easily discover that there is a very strong relationship between environment and emotions. For example, the goat's emotion is affected by its food and the natural disaster. However, when we take a look at our history, we would discover that the time our species exists on this planet is incredibly short. Our agricultural society has about 10,000 years of history, and the Industrial Revolution, which is the fundamental event of modern-day society, occurred only 250 years ago. When it comes to depression, this fact is very intriguing because we just learned that there is a very strong relationship between emotions and environment, and depression is considered a kind of emotional disorder. There are some basic challenges of depression in modern days. As I just talked about, the environment has changed and we're facing different threats than before. In the past, we used to live on prairie, and predators were used to be our major concerns because they're most likely to kill us. So there's a mechanism called fight or flight response built in our genes. With this response, we could decide whether to run from predators or fight predators very quickly. So in the past, this response helped us to survive. But in modern days, we no longer live on prairie anymore, and we don't have to worry about predators. In fact, we live in cities, and our professional careers are our major concerns. When we're in a meeting, this response emerges in our mind and makes us nervous. So we might underperform because of it. This is simply not good. Yet, this response is still preserved in our brains. The second basic challenge of depression is the slow process of evolution. Evolution itself is a very slow process, and that means our genes usually need time to adapt to current environment. However, the society nowadays has changed in a very astonishing speed, and our genes don't have enough time to adapt to modern society. In this case, the likelihood of our emotional systems being dysfunctional is higher than before, and eventually it may cause depression. Overall, from an evolutionary aspect, we could say that depression is part of our species' evolution, and to some degree, it's ordinary and natural to happen. Through affective science, we learned about depression in a fundamental basis. However, when it comes to human depression, it is much more complicated. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is linguistic capability. Some say that we're different from other animal species because we're able to communicate and think through language. However, human depression can be attributed to this effect. When we encounter bad mood, it is common that we try to figure out what makes us so sad, and our linguistic capability often supports us to turn abstract ideas into clear and concrete sentences. This concretization effect is unique and cannot be seen among other animals. However, it is double-edged. Through considering every possible factors, it often enhances the worries and lead us down another path of depression. The second things I would like to talk about is our wills. Because we're not like other animals, we have ability to choose to act according to our emotions or our rational decision. But this ability sometimes would cause depression. To elaborate this point more specifically, I would like to talk about one of the most iconic symptoms of major depressive disorder, which is lying in one's bed all days and can't seemingly to do anything. We may wonder, what's the psychology behind this phenomenon? As I previously mentioned, our emotions often reflect the environment we lived in. And when we're facing the problems that are impossible to overcome, our negative emotions appear and stop us from wasting unnecessary energy on them. This mechanism seems logical and probably right because our energy is basically our lifeline. But humans can choose not to act according to our emotions. What if we keep telling ourselves to pursue those unreachable goals? Our emotional system told us to stop and lower our desire for those unreachable goals, while our wills determinedly resist our emotion. At this point, our emotions and our will collide. Eventually, in order to get us back to normal, our emotional system will not only lower our desire for those unreachable goals, but also lower our desires for other meaningful things, and that would cause depression. The impact depression brings to one's life is immense, but after acknowledging the emotional mechanism behind this mental illness, I believe we could come to a conclusion that depression is part of our evolutionary process. And also, because we're a very complicated species, it is very important for us to remember to adjust our lifestyle according to our emotions.